if you are a keen follower of the Whova app, you may have noticed that you are getting not two Stephanies, just one Stephanie for this session. We decided to give the most heroic of the Stephanies at this particular event, Steph Ifayemi, a bit of a break from talking. It requires you to be a slightly less keen follower to notice that she's the one who has the title that is policy in her title. I don't. I'm the acting director of programs and research, which means that I really shouldn't give a talk on the subject to my left or to my right. Instead, what I'll do is offer what would, in American broadcasting tradition, probably be billed as a brief word from our sponsors. Not sure if that carries over to the BBC. I hope it does. And speak a little bit about sort of who we are as PAI, how we do our work, and what we're trying to accomplish over the next year. And I'll make those brief remarks intended very much more as an invitation rather than an infomercial. And then I'll hand over to Rebecca Finley, our CEO, to close us out for the day. So when it comes to sort of who we are and what we do as PAI, we know that there are many of you in the audience who have been with us since the very early days of our founding. And we're delighted that you're still here, still active participants in our community. We also know that there's a few of you who took total chance on showing up for 2 days. And to you, we also say welcome, and we're thrilled to have you. Hopefully you've had a chance to get a little bit of a taste of sort of what we do here, but you may still be a little curious as to what happens when we aren't all gathered in a room for 2 days in London. So that's what this is intended to address. So PAI is an organization, and you've heard this word many times throughout our conversations over the last 2 days, is intentionally multi-stakeholder in its operations as well as its focus. What that means is that we work very intentionally across civil society, industry, and academia in our work to ensure that artificial intelligence benefits both people and society. And that multi-stakeholder focus isn't just a question about who counts as a member of the partnership or who is involved in getting the work done. It's also how we think about the audiences of our work. We aren't just focused on creating tools for AI developers to ensure that their work is socially beneficial. We're also focused on equipping other members of the broader ecosystem to make sure that they have what they need to advocate for their needs, to advocate for their rights, and participate on equal footing on issues that matter to all of us. And so for us, what that looks like in terms of actual practice, and also given that we are at the policy forum, I did offer the disclaimer up top that I'm not a policy person, but I will say policy is increasingly also an audience and a participant, and we are delighted to have that as a factor in the PAI community now. How do we do our work? So the first thing that we do is a lot of issue spotting. What exactly is percolating? What can we get ahead of? What is turning up in our conversations with our partners, whether they're from industry, whether they're from civil society, whether they're from academia or the policy landscape, that's starting to percolate, starting to become top of mind. That's the moment when we start saying, okay, how do we get a sense of what this issue is in full? That's the point where we might do something like pull together a convening or a workshop, perhaps even a working group or a steering committee, to start really going deep into issue definition. We've all agreed that this risk, for instance, is something that we've identified as an important priority, somewhat likely or either absolutely impressive in terms of magnitude, and as a result ought to be paid attention to. Well, then we need to start defining it effectively in order to be able to address it with recommendations or solutions. So once we get that sort of engine spun up in terms of we found the issue, we're confident that it's real, we have a good grasp on sort of what the different elements of it are, what's the structure of the thing, we then work with that same community. So again, steering committees, working groups, workshops, forums, to try and make sure that we are able to create useful solutions and recommendations on these subjects. As you are probably very aware, we are not a government body. We don't have any enforcement abilities. We cannot regulate anybody in this room or ensure that they do what we tell them to. We can, however, make sure that we're trying to set norms for the community that create the AI world that we actually all want to live in. And so we take that as sort of the opportunity to start setting norms, start developing practices, and then move into implementation and accountability. We have 5 program areas. You've seen, I think, representatives from all of them across these last couple of days. First, of course, safety, which you heard a great deal about yesterday, led by our fearless leader, Madhu, who I'm looking for in the room. I was going to tell her to stand up, but you have seen her before. So Madhu is the one who is leading our safety work. The media integrity work you just heard from Claire. Claire, if you could stand up. I know you were just on stage, but Okay, she'll wave. We'll take a wave. The labor and economy work, which I am leading in coordination with Sonam Jindal, who was on stage for the human rights panel before. So you've seen both of us as well. Our FTA, so fairness, transparency, and accountability, and documentation work related to About ML. We don't have somebody from that team officially in the room yet, but I am sort of a deputy About ML person at this point and deputy fairness and transparency person. So feel free to come to me with questions about that program. And then finally, we have our inclusive research and design program, which probably shouldn't be the last one in the list because it actually underpins almost everything else that we do. That's thinking both about inclusive research practices for the field writ large, and then also making sure that those are woven throughout the way that we work as PAI. And part of the reason that I wanted to just flag each of those individuals who are leading that work and sort of say, okay, this is the face that you should be looking to if you're interested in these issues, is because I really do mean this as an invitation, not an infomercial. We want you to get involved. And so what might that look like in terms of recent work that we've done that we're hoping that people might experiment with, adopt, give us feedback on, or help us build over the course of the next year? So in the last year, we've really been focused heavily on trying to get guidelines and recommendations out to the field. Those guidelines and recommendations have come across a number of different domains, different audiences, et cetera. You've heard so far in depth about the safety announcement that was made yesterday. You heard in depth from Claire and her panel just now about the synthetic media framework. You also heard earlier from Sonam about the guidelines for the responsible sourcing of data enrichment labor. So I'll throw two others out there that you might not be as aware of because we didn't make them focal points for these sessions. The first is related to AI and local news and ensuring that local newsrooms are equipped with what they need to use AI systems responsibly. And the second is the guidelines for AI and shared prosperity, which is the work that I've been leading over the last 3 years in collaboration with a fantastic steering committee, as well as a number of other wonderful contributors to that work. The goals of the AI and shared prosperity guidelines are to ensure that all of us live in a future of work that actually is desirable, where the benefits of AI systems are broadly shared on an economic basis, and where all of us end up having jobs that we consider to be, that we're able to work in with dignity, and that we also are excited to turn up in our jobs about every day. So, small goals. If you're curious about that, happy to chat after the discussion. Each of those is something where we are actively seeking feedback. We would love to hear your thoughts. We also want to know if you've picked it up and started using it. Part of the feedback is telling us where we haven't gotten it quite right in terms of implementation, or where we might be able to assist the community more broadly by building out additional tools and resources. So if that's any of those things on that list sparks your interest, please come find one of us, and we're very happy to chat. So just very quickly before I hand over to Rebecca to close us out for today's session, I think another important question is, in this moment of a flurry of activity, many different organizations, a rapidly changing technical as well as policy environment, where is PAI going next? And I'd say that we have two major focuses. The first is continuing to deepen and provide implementation guidance for that, the guidelines for safe deployment of foundation models that you've already heard about. There's 22 different protocols listed within that. We have implementation guidance that sits beneath some of those. Others, we're really, as has been a recurring theme, it's a starting point. If that's something that you're interested in, we would love to collaborate with you, talk with you about how to prioritize, figure out how to work together to get those into implementable shape over the coming year and years to come. The second is really thinking deeply about community-driven AI. It's not just a question about sort of what can we do that's focused on sort of foundation models or foundation model providers. There's also a question about how do we ensure that diverse global voices, that the entire community of people who are going to be affected by these systems are actually participating and steering them, helping set these conversations about regulation, about voluntary commitments, all of these different ideas. And so that work is something where it's happening both in terms of Tina Park's work with the Global Task Force for Inclusive AI. It's also happening with some of the work on the labor and economy programs. And we're thinking, as creatively as we can about how we're going to be able to get more global voices in the room. So, as I've said, this is an invitation. We want you to come with us in the journey. We're excited you're already here. We would love for you to stick around. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand over to Rebecca to tell you what that might look like.